I don't want to see it come like the NFL. There's something special about college football.
That's by far the best argument against me, is that you're good with it. I mean, honestly, that's the best argument. I mean, because I'm literally modeling it after the NCAA and the playoff NFL playoffs. Yeah, people will be like, I hate that. Well, okay, I got nothing for that. I mean, that's legit.
Welcome to the My God a Podcast Dawg Sports Live crossover. I'm Jim Wood. In this episode, my co-host John Powell and I join Josh Hancher and Graham Coffey on Dawg Sports Live to discuss the potential expansion of the college football playoff. We also discuss the 2021 NFL Draft. Just a heads up, this episode is also available in video form on the Dawg Sports Live YouTube channel. There will be a link to the video in the show notes. Now, I'm going to turn it over to Graham Coffey.
Welcome to the very special Dawg Sports Live My God a Podcast crossover event. My name is Graham Coffey. You might know me on Twitter as Dawg Out West. I am joined tonight by Josh Hancher, Jim Wood, and John Powell to discuss the college football playoff. As we know, there was some news this week about possible expansion, and there's some very strong opinions currently on this podcast about what is right and wrong for the long-term health of the sport, and also I think what's fair. So before we jump into all of that, introduce yourself, guys. Say hello, Josh.
Good evening, guys. I did not stick the landing on the opening as usual, so no gifts necessary. But no, I'm happy to talk about this. I'm actually, I go on everything I can and talk about this. So I'm happy to discuss and take the heat from all the guys that sort of like something closer to what we have, and I'd like to see something kind of reinvented.
Fair enough. John, please introduce yourself.
Hey, I'm one half of My God a Podcast, John Powell, at Powell John T. Jim and I have basically been doing My God a Podcast for the last year or so, and we've obviously collaborated on Twitter a good bit, and we've had some banter on everything from sauces to college playoffs. So
let's not forget the bourbon
and the bourbon.
Yeah,
cheers.
Totally. Cheers. What's up, Jim? How are you tonight?
Hey, Graham. Yeah, I'm doing well. So Jim Wood, the other half of My God a Podcast, FTMF. Josh, thanks for the hat. And we're obviously like big fans of you guys. We followed the show, banter on Twitter. I know many people have commented that when the four of us like start jumping in together, the threads get like really long. And so we took that to a DM and said, hey, why don't we lay down a recording and talk through it instead of a crazy thread? So looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, big fan of you guys as well. And yeah, thank you for all the engagement over the last year. I feel like you two might be like the first people that became aware of the Battle Hymnal and now the Dawg Sports Live project. So yeah, thank you guys so much for all of the support and conversation, and most of all, just the fun discussion. So, Josh, do you want to begin? Because I feel like you have the most maybe impassioned takes here on college football playoff.
Where to start? Here's my thing. It's like I truly don't understand the fixation on or the fear of or that an expanded playoff will destroy the regular season. I don't know how, in what world, in what postseason that you could invent that the Iron Bowl doesn't mean something, that Georgia Florida doesn't mean something, or that the battle for the jug, or the big game, Ohio State, Michigan. All those games are always going to mean something, and God forbid if there's a rematch of one of those games in a postseason where it's win or go home. I can only imagine how much more. Imagine Georgia, Florida in a semifinals. I mean, I'm exhilarated by the thought of that. I think it's exciting. I mean, like, I think I tried to find some, but I couldn't find anything. I saw a Furman Bisher article from after the very first SEC championship in 1992, where it said all eyes were on college football. All of the athletic directors and conference presidents were watching if this was going to work. So, I mean, it was groundbreaking when the SEC, split divisions, expanded their conference and made a championship game, which is now standard. I just think that is the best sport with the most effed up postseason. I mean, we've had 5 split championships since 1973 or 74. In the BCS era, we had a rematch of a 6-3 or 9-6 game between LSU and Alabama. I just don't see how that expanding and reinventing it and making this settled on the field rather than an somewhat arbitrary, BCS +1, which is all we've got. There's no way you can really say that 4 teams is really going to lay out a true playoff. It's not a true playoff. It's a BCS +1. So there's my take. I'm going to let somebody jump in and either hammer me or
Well,
so there it is.
But before we get the next jump in, what is your proposed solution? What would you like to see the college football playoff look like?
Okay, I think every Power 5 conference champion should be in. So there's 5. So my crazy pie in the sky is let me do the math here. I think it's so championship week, you have the 5 playoff, the 5 conferences playing in a championship game. You got 10 teams there. Then you get. So what do you do with Notre Dame? What do you do with the group of 5? What do you do with some non-division winners that aren't playing in the conference championships that are deserving, like Ohio State in 2015 or 2016 and Alabama in 2017. So you have a playoff for them where they play the same weekend or that same week, sort of call it the play-in games, where you take the best group of 5 team, Notre Dame, and then some non-division winners that are honestly worthy by some committee. There will be some subjectivity to it, but yeah. So basically, yeah. So you got the 5 Power 5 champions. You get an at-large from those teams in case that, an undefeated team gets, has an injury early in the game and gets upset big time, but they're clearly one of the best teams, so they get a redo. And then you have the 4 playoff play-in games from the independents and group of 5s and non-division winners. Give the top 2 seeds a bye and play it off on the field, similar to what, closer to what the NFL has. So I don't think anybody complains about the NFL playoffs. Why wouldn't we complain about a real college football playoff?
So is that 12 teams?
I think I've gotten it up to 14 or 16. I could go back on my Twitter. But it's really kind of the first round is sort of like an expanded conference playoff championship or expanded conference championship weekend, where you add some teams that aren't in it, and then those winners get in and you add one from an at-large spot.
So Georgia has to play Alabama in the first round of the playoffs every year?
If they're in the SEC championship. Yeah, I mean that's the thing. It gives a benefit to winning the division, right? At the beginning of the year, if you win your division, you got a chance to win a national championship. If you win your conference, you're going to have a chance to win a national championship. It gives a clear road path. It's not some thing where you could be like the Pac-12 and you're going to be some group of people in a hotel room in Dallas, Texas, are going to decide what's the better team between the Pac-12 and the Big 12. And it's like there's no rules. There's no format for any of that. They just randomly, subjectively decide who's going to get in. And especially, I mean, hopefully we'll never have another COVID year, but then, there's not enough. There's too much subjectivity to how we crown a national champion. I've spoken enough. Somebody say something.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with a lot of what you're saying. Like my issue gets more with the volume and also in your model where I know you're saying the conference champions get in, but the conference championship game loser, I believe in your model, is not eliminated. Is that correct?
There would be one at large from that conference championship that could be chosen.
Okay. So
right.
You could have a loser in, and then you can also and then you can also have non-division winners even. Right.
Yes, you'd have a non-division winner that would play, but they'd have to play in. Unlike Alabama, they didn't have to play in a conference championship in 2017, and Ohio State in I can't remember 2016 or 2015. They didn't. They actually got a bye week. They got a do-over. So that in my scenario, they actually have to play a head-to-head to get into, or they've got another game to play. I mean, they're kind of in at that point, but yeah, they're going to be playing a Notre Dame, a Michigan, a Cincinnati, or whoever if the committee determines that there's a group of 5 worthy team to play in there, maybe it's a Florida and imagine 2017 where it's Florida and Alabama in a play in somewhere in Orlando, and Georgia and Auburn playing in the SEC championship. That's kind of like what I'm cooking up. No one's called me. I haven't trademarked it. So as of right now, you guys are all safe. I'm not in charge.
Yeah. I mean, so for me, and this is probably like a super like old man statement. Like, I feel like we've kind of forgotten what a playoff or like what is a point of a playoff, right? So to me, and this is opinion, I guess, but to me, like the point of a playoff is we have 2 teams or 2 competitors in whatever sport, right? That we don't have enough information to determine who's best, right? So like a golf tournament, perfect example, right? Through 4 days, they have the same score at the end of the tournament. We need a playoff, right? To figure out who's best. That's super simple. But when you look at, like, to me, like the perfect one was Major League Baseball before, like when there were 2 divisions per league, right? So you had the AL and NL, you had 2 divisions, you had the 2 division winners, and that was it. They're playing different schedules, right? We don't know who's better. And then at the granddaddy of it, you had the World Series against 2 teams who had never played each other, right? So to me, like, holy cow, like we are settling on the field something that we could not possibly know. Like, to me, that's awesome. And I love your point about SEC championship game, right? Like, that was innovative, that was new, that was different. And we're doing a similar thing there, right? We've got unbalanced schedules. We can sit around and argue, oh, the West is better. That stuff is cyclical, right? Like now, yeah, but several years ago, it wasn't. It was the opposite, right? So those things are going to go in cycles. And so you take the winner of each division and let's find out who's really the best. Could you end up with a rematch? Yeah, we know we did with Georgia and Auburn in 2017. We had it with Georgia and LSU in 2003 as well. I'm sure there were other ones, but I don't know. But to me, again, like, it's based on you're getting there. To your point, Josh, you're getting there objectively, right? You're the division winner. We take those 2, and we have a playoff for the SEC to see who wins. So to me, like, I can get behind that. What kills me is this, like these teams that I feel like you should have been eliminated. Like, if you can't even win your division, how in the world are you the champion of the nation? And like, that's what kills me. And so that's what worries me and concerns me about expansion. Like, to me, I think we could get a better playoff with 4, to me personally, if I'm not saying it's an automatic bid, but I'm saying it's a requirement that you are your conference's champion to get in. And people will say, what about Notre Dame? And I'll say, join a conference.
Yeah, the Notre Dame is definitely a problem in most scenarios, but
yeah.
But that, I mean, I love the idea, but it's just too many, like, there's too many. What about this? What about this? I mean, so the expansion, I think, is going to have to include, some sort of non-division winner that's going to be in. I think. I'm afraid.
And it's going to. And so, like, I'm like, well, everything I'm saying is like all for naught, and I know it. It's coming, and like, so I'm trying to prepare myself for it, but I'm totally like yelling at everyone to get off my lawn that I don't want it to happen, but I know it's going to happen.
Fair enough. Where are you at on this, John?
I think that you and I are kind of the 2 guys that are like, I could really go one way or the other. I don't want to speak for you, but I see points for Josh. I see points for Jim. What really like grinds my gears is when a 1-loss UGA is out of any sort of expanded playoff because they didn't win the SEC championship. That scenario to me just cannot happen. Like a one loss SEC runner up should be in any sort of expanded playoff. So Josh, if they didn't win the SEC championship, then they potentially would be out, unless they didn't get one of those at-large bids. And then I look to seasons like where you've got like a BYU, or you've got an Army or someone in one of the lesser conferences that's undefeated that gets in ahead of a 1-loss UGA or a 1-loss Florida or a 1-loss Bama, whatever it is. Like, to me, like that subjectivity of strength of schedule would be of importance for anyone getting in. So I could be swayed one way or the other. I think, like Jim, like everybody knows, I think we all know that the money is too much for it to not expand. It's just a matter of when. So I try not to get wrapped around the axle. Like, let's just figure out whatever it is that the people that are writing the checks are going to decide, and then we'll run with it for a few years, and then it'll probably expand again.
I think that any expansion should include a reward for clearly the best team or the best two teams, and that should be in a bye. You win the SEC with one loss or zero, undefeated. You should get a bye. You should get advantage. And if you're UCF or if you're Cincinnati or whatever, and you haven't played the schedule of a Michigan or a Georgia or an FSU or whatever, and you get one shot, you get to line up against a non-division winner and see who wins it on the field. And I think actually expanding the playoff actually protects the really good teams and the teams that have been tested and have played the best schedule. So yeah, sure, it could, App State beat Michigan in the Big House in the regular season game, but I think that lining up in December with everything on the line versus a Georgia from 2020, that we got all we could handle with Cincinnati in the Peach Bowl. Imagine if that game were to advance to win the championship as opposed to just not just a great bowl game, and it's like, I think it keeps the players invested. The bowl games have been so watered down by the even just the 14 BCS. I mean, it's like the kid from Stanford who was in at Carolina, who's totally drawn a blank on his name. He was the very first big name that opted out of a bowl game. McCaffrey opted out of a bowl game, and that's going to be the pattern. I mean, that's going to be routine, and I that's a whole nother subject, but it doesn't bother me. If you're not playing for something, then why play? You're risking too much, especially if you're talking about getting drafted in the NFL. So I think to value the season, I don't want to undervalue the regular season, but I think an expanded playoff actually makes it all much more valuable for the players and the fans. And I think it's good for I don't want to get all sappy, but I think it's important to expand it to give more teams a chance. If you're telling me that like a lot of people have told me, it's like, well, the best team's not going to win. Well, tournament doesn't always award the best team. It's the NCAA championship is great because not the best team always doesn't win, but it's exciting. It's great. And you're still a champion. And like if LSU had gotten beaten in the second round, they still would have had a great year, but they didn't win at all. None of that bothers me. We got to fix the sport, make it better. And I just only see positives out of all this. And if Blutarski's watching, he's actually turned it off by now.
All right. I agree with him.
So, all right. The more I've listened to this, I think I have kind of developed an opinion here. So I do agree with you, Josh, that the postseason does need to become more interesting. There needs to be an incentive to keep these guys involved because, bowls have always been exhibitions. You go back to the early time of college football, like the only pictures you will ever see Bear Bryant looking happy in is like him at a bowl game, like tanned, buttons open on the shirt, cocktail, some floral patterns. The rest of the time, meanest son of a bitch on earth, right? So, like, one way or the other, either we just admit that these are exhibitions and, we stop using them to rank teams or to, kind of gauge where programs are at, or we need to do something to really incentivize winning those games and keeping players involved. So, like, I'm with you there. I think my issue with the current playoff format is, like you said earlier, that we have a BCS +1. And to an extent, I agree with you, but I think that the BCS we actually had a formula for. Like, there was a formula for the BCS that, was not subjective. And after watching Ohio State make a 14 playoff last year after playing 6 games, like, I think we've kind of broken a barrier of sorts where really at this point, like, resume is not going to matter and anything can be justified. And so my concern going forward is that, like, we're going to have a college football playoff field that's really based on recruiting rankings, because we know every year Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, maybe Georgia, like, those teams are going to be the most talented teams. And I feel like we're at the point where, the perception has become reality, and that, you know, when those guys get in that room in Dallas, the benefit of the doubt gets given to these teams that we know have boatloads of talent on it.
Well, let me jump in on the whole BCS, and that everyone starting. I've even seen people say, "Let's go back to the BCS," and I think the BCS form. There are tons of people that track it and say who would have been the 4 teams chosen by the BCS, and I think Ohio State made it in on the BCS rankings that, you know, extrapolated out to 2020. But, you know, Dan Wetzel, who wrote the book, you know, Death to the BCS, talked about it in Death. There it is. Look at that. How about that?
I came prepared.
Solid.
Yeah.
Exhibit A.
All right.
Exhibit
If Dan Wetzel owes us a retweet on that. Timestamp. No, but he said, you know, he talked about Utah with Alex Smith and how awesome a season they had, and he was, you know, floating around all these, and the Harris poll people literally had not watched Utah play. So
right.
if you're, and I don't think we're to that point with the playoff committee not watching the players, but it's like you talk about recruiting rankings, they're walking in with a preconceived notion who the best 4 teams are, and it's going to be hard to get them off of that. I say you expand it out. Let them line it up on the field and settle it. And I'm sorry if the best team, whether it's, you know, Alabama or Clemson or, you know, 2019 LSU, they got beat. I just don't see a problem with it. It's, you know, Tampa Bay won the Super Bowl as a 4 seed. You know, Pittsburgh won it as a 5 seed in their conference.
But
Yeah.
I guess here's my, now that I've like told you all the things I like about your arguments.
You got to do a little bit of that every now and then.
I'm going to tell you what I dislike, which is the fact, like, if we're talking about using conference championships as a play-in model, I did a little homework. So from the ACC in 2018, we had a 7-5 Pitt team play Clemson in the conference championship. In 2018, we had Northwestern, who lost 21-7 to Duke and 39-34 to Akron, play at 8-4 in the Big Ten championship game. And so, like, that's why I asked you the question earlier, like, so Georgia has to play Alabama in the first round of the playoffs every year, because I do think, like, there would have to be some sort of reseed. But
yeah,
the beauty of college football, and I'll shut up after this point, is that, like, college football has by far the most interesting regular season of any sport that I know of. And you were talking about those games, you know, the rivalry games, the traditional rivalry games meaning something. They're going to mean something no matter what. And I agree with you 100%. They are, because there's emotional charge there. But the thing I love about college football is that random Saturday in early November where, you know, Ohio State is on the ropes at like some random, like Indiana or some random
Iowa?
Big Ten team. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Wherever it is, you know, and we know in that moment that their whole season could go up in flames.
That's the thing. To me, like college football, the stakes are so high every week. And like, you know, I mean, like, and Josh, I mean, if I were to watch this back, I know I cringed when you said, like, what if Georgia and Florida played in the playoff? And I'm like, oh, like that game, like that game feels so big. Like, okay, so when I was in school, I went down there and we lost every single time. Like, and like my heart was absolutely broken, right? And so, like, to me, like those, I don't know, man. Part of the cool thing about college football is like you have those lows. And I hope to someday feel that high, and it's going to make it feel so much better.
When we walked out of Bryant Denny in September this year, we were all saying we get another shot at him. That didn't bum us out.
Yeah, I know. And that's somewhat of a rare scenario, right? Like I mean, to be able to have that, I mean, when's the next time we play Alabama? You know, I mean, it's going to be a long time.
We thought it was. We were hoping for it was December.
But you could get there objectively, right? Again, that, like, to me, I don't care about a rematch in a conference championship when you're determining, right, you know, objectively determining the division winners. And the only, like, okay, look, we already have this. I mean, I have an issue with like these teams that just keep getting in. So Alabama, they always get the benefit of the doubt. Whatever, you can say they've earned it, I guess, but whatever. Ohio State, they get the benefit of the doubt, right? And Notre Dame, right? So those 3 teams are the 3 teams that have made it into the playoff without winning their conference, right? No one else has ever done it. They get to play by their own rules, and like that annoys me. So like, to me, again, if we expand it, it becomes the Alabama Invitational. And like maybe it already is, but they're never going to get left out. To Josh's or Graham, Graham, to your point of the recruiting rankings, how are you going to leave them out?
Well, if you're going to put Alabama in, what's better, Alabama penciled in August in a field of 4, or Alabama penciled in a field of 10?
It just annoys me that you can't eliminate them. Like, what the heck? Like why? Like we lose one game and we're out. Everybody else. Yeah, but back to your point earlier, like who cares? Like, what NFL is different than college. Like, I don't know. I just get annoyed with like Notre Dame this year too. Again, like you lose the conference championship and you're in. Like
you weren't even in the conference.
I know,
they were for a year, right?
I would put Cincinnati in this year, by the way. But anyways, John, you're trying to say something.
I mean, I was just about to say, like, Josh, your comment about like no one complains about the NFL. I mean, no one's complained about college football being amazing for however long it's been going on. So, like, I don't want to see it. I don't want to see it come like the NFL. There's something special about college football. Like,
that's by far the best argument against me, is that you're good with it. I mean, honestly, that's the best argument. I mean, because I'm literally modeling it after the NCAA and the NFL playoffs.
Yeah,
people be like, I hate that. Well, okay, I got nothing for that. I mean, that's legit. John wins. I'm out.
Well, I mean, the NCAA.
I like the NCAA tournament, but again, again, it is what it is. Like, if you think about it, I mean, it tends to weed itself out. But I mean, you're talking about getting the best team, and that is something like I kind of do care about. Like, I would like to see like find out who's the best, right? And so that's where I get to like, hey, let's have a playoff to figure out who's the best. And just the fact that I feel like we could, again, my way to improve it is to not give an automatic berth to a conference champion, but make having a conference championship be a requirement for entry. That's my thing. And even if we go to 6, like I think I could live with 6. Although if you do that, they were talking probably automatic bid for those 5, which, Graham, to your point, when you just ran down that list, like I know like in general, like the lesser team didn't win, but it's happened, right? Like Colorado, like in the BCS era, I can't remember, like Colorado beat Oklahoma or something, but then they were still in anyway. All these random things,
The only good thing that's happened to Georgia basketball was the fact that we got in because we won the conference championship to the 28 NCAA tournament. So don't take you're gonna take that away. I mean, that's there. I mean, what's wrong with just as Northwestern got in. Sorry, Ohio State. Imagine if Northwestern sent them packing. How the rest of the world would be all about an 8-5 Northwestern team. But in
your model, they don't send them packing, right? Because they're still going to get.
I mean, if there's one,
that's what I don't like. Yeah, that's what I don't like.
I mean,
dude, you are kind of winning me over thinking about Northwestern eliminating Ohio State from the postseason. That's pretty good.
Win or go home. I mean, that's what win or go home. Jim, you said it. You don't want Alabama getting a free pass. You've said the same thing. So let's line it up and figure out a way. It's win or go home. Not. How
do you feel about running? Because I've seen several scenarios like where you play the bowl games, like do the conference championships, do the bowl games, and then you'd pick.
Season's too long there, I think, at that point.
That's the true +1, right? So play out all the bowls, and then whoever's 1 and 2, but by whose metrics or by whose determination, then they play. I mean, but Josh, is that season going to be any longer than your model? I guess your model has it ending at the same time, right?
Yeah, I mean, what I would do is honestly, I've written this all down so many times, it's pathetic. My buddy John has heard this so many times, but it's like, but in my scenario, you take a week off after the end of the regular season, you give Army Navy that week before the conference champions and make that an event. So you've still got something waiting for you. It's not just another college football game stuck in at the end of the season like it is now. So, and then you get 2 weeks off, you get healthy, you get right. And basically the first round is that weekend. You get everything organized for the at-large play-ins. Conference championships have a 2-week build-up. And then you go right into, then you have a bye week for the teams that, the 2 teams that bye, they're going to play after Christmas. You play around before Christmas, you take 2 weeks off, and then you've got the semis after Christmas. I haven't thought about it that much, guys.
Sorry. So you know what else makes college football great though, right? Like arguing. And what are we sitting here doing? Like arguing the whole thing. Yeah. And that's where it's like I think Tony Waller jumped into your thread the other day and was like, just play the bowls and then let's just let the polls pick them again. Was that horrible? I mean, yeah, but I don't know. Again, maybe it's me and being old and having nostalgia. It's like, I don't know. It was pretty fun arguing about who's the best.
Dude, go look at the final ballot of the AP poll last year. I mean, and just tell
It's
me if
garbage.
You just
It
want
is
the-
horrible. It is horrible. Well, especially when you get down below like 1 and 2, right?
But
yeah,
I will say it's interesting that the Georgia's 2008 SEC championship in basketball was brought up here because I think that's the concern, right? Like the four of us are four of maybe a dozen people on Twitter that are actually watching the majority of Georgia basketball games throughout the season and discussing those, right?
And then I stopped watching. Truth be told, I stopped watching.
Jim's definitely in the majority.
Well, yeah, but my point being, once the NCAA tournament comes around, right? Everything, sports shows that don't talk about college basketball all year, it's bracket time and all of that. And yeah, the country gets involved for, a couple weeks, but the reality is that college basketball is hemorrhaging money because those television rights aren't worth to anyone. And that's why when conference realignment happens, schools with great basketball programs are left out in the cold in a lot of situations because they don't make more than a few $1 million a year. And I'm afraid that if we go too heavy on the postseason for college football and too large of a tournament type format, you create the same dynamic, and no one wants to watch, a random late September out of conference game between Georgia and UCLA or somebody.
I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, the college basketball, basically no one really cares until March is ultimately what we're talking about. No one really cares until March hits. And that's when the tournament happens. And that's when everybody's like, okay, now the season really starts. That to me is just that doesn't sit well with me for college football because number one, there's far fewer games. And number two, the stakes are so much higher, particularly in the SEC. So I don't know. I feel like that the comparison to basketball is almost unfair, but I mean, we all know that they're going to expand the playoff no matter what. But at the same time, I would hate no matter how you slice it, the regular season would be somewhat devalued by the time you get to 16 teams. If you can get in as a division winner, the regular season doesn't matter as much as it did before.
Totally. I mean, can we agree that even if the playoff expands or doesn't expand, would you guys like to see a little more concrete format on what's going on behind those closed doors and how those decisions are made or even some ballots, a kind of a release of who voted for who? Because I think that's my biggest issue right now is 2018 Georgia after losing to Alabama, when Hurts came in, there's no way that Georgia team was not one of the four best teams. But in 2018, we were told everything was based on resume. In 2020, when Ohio State plays 6 games and has half the resume of most of the country, we're just told they're one of the best teams, and you have to accept that. So
100% agree. That's where the certain teams get to play by one set of rules, and everybody else gets to play by another. And that's I feel like it always shifts to Georgia's disadvantage. One year it's this way, and it's oh, well, what about Georgia in 2002 or Georgia in 2007, right?
2007,
12, 18, all these years, right? It's well, the year before we let Ohio State in because of this, but now that we decided that was wrong, and that's not important anymore. It's a Georgia, screw you guys.
2012 is a great example. 2012 is a great example.
Yeah, we did.
The two best teams in the country were playing.
Yeah, everything happened. Well, actually, I'm thinking of the year 2 where everything had to happen for Georgia to sneak into the BCS without playing in the SEC championship, and we actually went down in the BCS rankings, even though everybody in front of us lost. So it was
that was 7.
Yeah,
that
was 7. Yeah, I mean, 2012, the SEC championship was de facto national championship, or at the very least, it was a semis. Which was great. I mean, at that point, it was win or go home, and we didn't win, and it sucks, but. But again, Notre Dame got to pass.
Speaking of passes, I mean, the ACC canceled Clemson and Notre Dame's last 2 regular season games.
Exactly. Exactly.
And so
about these precious, games, these precious.
Well, I'm not
regular
saying they
season
should have. I mean, I think that was up.
Yeah,
Well,
that was
I don't get too like worked up about this past year. Like anything happened.
Yeah,
I mean, like, come on, like pandemic. Oh,
But the precedent,
we've never seen anything like that there before. Yeah,
Dude.
yeah.
Notre Dame lost their last game. They got in. That is so wrong. That is, and then they got blown out again. I mean, God.
Well,
And that used to happen. That happened in the BCS too, multiple times.
Yes!
Right? There's one year when Oklahoma lost in the Big 12 championship game, and they were still number 1 in the BCS. And that was where, like when I got all on board with this thing, right? Like, death to the BCS, and like that's what got me into it. And I mean, I'm glad we went from the BCS to the playoff. But it's definitely, it's not perfect. It's imperfect for sure.
Dead horse. We had the draft.
Why can't we make the selection committee's meeting? If that was a show, if that was like on TV, oh my gosh, I'd be all in that.
I think we should do it at the Maricopa Courthouse, actually.
Well, Josh, how do you feel about the FCS playoff?
I think it's pretty awesome. And no one's ever really complained. I'm not telling you I'm going to.
Are you watching it?
No, I'm not watching it.
Well, the only reason I ask is because that's usually like the first, like they look at the lower levels of NCAA football to see what's going on. And I think John Tweets had mentioned this earlier today, that North Dakota State lost in the quarterfinals, and that was the first time that they had lost in 10 years. So it was like one team basically it took 10 years for them to have a shocker in that playoff scenario.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's a good point. I think truthfully, like I look at the system the way it is right now, and after what Clemson and Notre Dame did with the ACC last year, like I think next year when the SEC title comes around, if you got 11-1 Georgia and 12-0 Alabama or whatever it is, like the SEC should just be like, no, we're not playing it. Like, if Georgia doesn't play in the SEC title game in 18 or 19, they are in the playoff. And that 18 team was good enough to win it. The 19 team, not hot garbage, James Coley, all that issues. But, like, seriously, like, it's not.
I drink every time James Coley gets mentioned.
Like, we're sitting here talking about, like, desire for competition through a playoff. But the reality is that, like, the schools in the SEC see that competition week in and week out anyways. And you've got schools like Clemson and Notre Dame that are cakewalking into the playoffs every single year. Ohio State continues to become more and more in control of the Big Ten. And so it's like, why don't we shuffle the deck when it comes to the regular season? It's like, why don't those teams have to play each other? Why isn't there some sort of system? I don't know what that would be. I've not thought about this until this moment, but it's just like, it's another thought because the regular season stays as interesting as it is, or more interesting, but like B, the schedules are more balanced that way.
Are you suggesting that they go to like a European Super League, like in what was suggested in soccer earlier this week?
No, I'm not suggesting that. I don't want anyone like burning my house down. But,
exactly.
No, but I'm saying like, let's take some sort of system and, the Ohio States, it doesn't have to be a super league, but, identify the 12 or 15 or 20 best teams from the year before and cross those teams over the second or third week of the season before conference play starts. We have the ACC Big Ten Challenge in basketball every year for a week, and it's actually pretty entertaining.
But who's
why not do that?
It's the home gates, and you can't give up home games. There's too much, that so many programs need as many home games as they can, and it's tough.
That's why all these major out of conference matchups are at neutral sites now.
Well, yeah.
Sounds like
no. You're right. But they get paid. Honestly, some of those teams are actually getting more from that gate than they would their home gate. Florida State and Clemson. Not Clemson, but like certainly UVA. They're getting paid more to go to Mercedes or to Camping World or whatever, Louisville when they played Alabama. So yeah, it's all about the dough. All right, you want to pivot into the NFL draft?
Well, let's let Jim and John, if they have any last thoughts, we'll pivot after that.
I think I pretty much said my piece. The only other thing I'll point out is I wore this shirt because it still drives me crazy that I can wear this. No one from Bama can, and they won the national championship.
I got that shirt in my closet. It's a good shirt.
Yeah.
How about you, John? You got anything to close with on the playoff debate?
No, I was going to chime in there at the end because it sounded like Josh was basically saying that college football was too big. Because if there's teams that are relying on some of these paychecks, then maybe we need to cut down Division One.
I possibly that could solve a lot of problems actually, right. if you got rid of some of the teams that like kind of going with the super conference, it's like but that folds into all the other non-revenue sports, and at some point we're going to actually realize that it's a revenue sport and these athletes should be compensated, but talk about opening a can of worms.
Yeah. So as Josh mentioned, NFL draft was this weekend. Georgia with a school record 9 NFL draft selections, which is a miracle because Kirby Smart can't develop talent. So
I think I read that somewhere.
Not sure how that happened, but what were you guys' impressions from the draft? Any takeaways or?
I think it speaks volumes that Georgia had 9 players drafted, Alabama had 6 in the first round or something like that. I mean, it just tells you there is we rag on Florida and the gap between Florida and Georgia right now in recruiting, but there's still a good bit of a gap between Georgia and Alabama. It's closing, and we have the means to do it, but it's still like Danny Cannell was thumping his chest about everyone, the SEC taking a victory lap for the most players drafted in the first round or whatever. And he said it was just really Alabama. But by the time the second and third round had completed, it was clear that the SEC has the most talent. The only conference with all 14 teams having a player selected. So yeah, I mean, and it was somewhat exhausting to try to keep up with the Florida people. I don't understand why. Talk about a hill worth dying on. Like I always talk about this, expanded playoff hill that I'm dying on. But Jesus Christ, Florida, give it a rest. I mean, it's just like, and there's no factual basis for it. It's just dumb.
None at all. None whatsoever. What about you guys?
Yeah, I mean, on the Florida thing, to me, like at least they're like trying to talk themselves up to us when they're like clearly beneath us, right? The weirder thing to me is like Alabama fans' obsession with Georgia. Like if I was an Alabama fan, I wouldn't care about Georgia at all. Like that's the biggest mystery to me on the internet. But anyways, aside from that, to me, like the biggest surprise for me personally was Azeez Ojulari. Like I thought he was going to go a lot higher. And I think the difference between like you said, Josh, you got all those Bama guys going in the first round. For whatever reason, these Bama guys, they come back for one more year and they improve their stock. And we haven't quite figured that out at Georgia. I have a hard time telling a kid he should stay in school because, like we just said, they're not getting paid. So I can't tell them to stay, for that reason. Like, I understand you want to move on, you want to go make money. I get it. So, but I don't know. Like, sometimes if you wait longer, you can get more. There's the risk of injury, et cetera. But there's different conversations or a different attitude. Obviously, different decisions are being made with those kind of borderline guys at Bama where they go. And then we've got, Trey Hill leaving, going really late, right? Where you come back. I mean, who knows? I wouldn't think any of those guys have gone any lower next year than they did this year.
Sure.
Yeah. I think that obviously having 9 players drafted I think this was the first class, right, that was basically all recruited by Kirby Smart. So
yeah,
correct.
From here on out, you've got nothing but Kirby's players coming through. And the fact that we've already set the record at 9 is pretty telling for what's to come, basically. I think I saw someone post about how if you factor in the last 2 drafts or something like that 2017 or 2018 team that Alabama had like something like 12 first-round draft picks or something like that. It was ridiculous. Like they obviously have a recruiting powerhouse over there, and it's going to sustain, which we've been building and we have in place. So for us, I feel like that those types of days and those types of draft days are coming.
Totally.
And for Florida to come out and, Graham, you and I were on a thread where there was a post about how many draft picks that each team had since like 2016 or something like that, and Florida was just ahead of us, and all the Florida guys were jumping all over it. And I'm like, yeah, you got 4 L's.
Damn!
Congratulations, guys! You totally played yourself.
Dude, that was impressive. Yeah, so I was so frustrated by a lot of that talk on Twitter, and I don't have a life or any good things to do with my time. So last night I actually dove pretty deep into not just how Kirby Smart recruits have performed in terms of their draft status, but also just national averages. So one thing that's interesting is first of all, every 5-star recruit that has come to Georgia that has finished their career or eligibility at UGA to this point has been drafted, which is 7 guys. 4 transferred out. There's still, I believe, 14 more on the roster. That number will go down. Some of those guys that were in the 18 class, it's not looking like they're going to be drafted, but still that's a very impressive return rate when you consider about a little over 38% of all 5-stars are never drafted at all. So, I mean, that's pretty interesting. The other kind of data that came out is that the average 4-star has about a 25% chance of being drafted. There's 330 4-star recruits in each class, and there's about 80 of them that are drafted in a given year, give or take year by year. But for Georgia, again, and the criteria that I used here is guys that were recruited by Kirby Smart. So this does not include anyone that was on the roster when he took over from Richt. So starting with the 2016 class, and also guys that actually finished their careers at Georgia, whether that was 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. But of 16 4-stars that have finished their careers at Georgia that Kirby has signed, 10 of them have been NFL draft picks. So that's about 2.5 times the national average of 24.2%. What's even crazier, though, is that 8 3-stars have been signed by Smart staff, and 2 of those guys have been draft picks, whereas across college football, across the FBS, there's about 1,600 3-stars a year. 5% of those guys will be drafted in a given year. So, however you want to slice it, you can't really say he's wasting 5-star talent.
Yeah.
You can't say
there's no negative recruiting that can be done against those numbers. Right. You get, there's a lot of things you can say is you're not going to waste away at Georgia. And it's a tired and it's unsustainable, narrative to try to spin that crap. And, like you said, Jim, that Florida's got just a few more NFL players over the last 5 years, and they've won less games than Georgia. And I had a Michigan guy, and it was just saying that he was like, nobody does less than more than Kirby. I'm like, oh my God,
I saw that.
I was like, are you kidding me? Jim Harbaugh is the 3rd highest paid coach has more NFL draft players than Florida and Georgia, and has less wins. It's like, anyway. So good work out of you, Graham.
Football.
Thanks. Oh. Yeah, no, I mean, that's, I don't know about you guys, but I'm kind of at that frustrated tipping point where it's just no one's going to stop on Kirby Smart, at least these other opposing fans, until Georgia wins the title. And It's extremely frustrating. In hindsight, it's I was sitting in the Mercedes-Benz Dome, and we were, that close in 2017. But I don't know. My argument, truthfully, is just Kirby's had some growing pains for sure. There was some bad decisions, bad game management. Never should have let Coley hold on to the playbook. But you just don't recruit a top one or two roster over the course of a decade and not stumble into a national title. I mean, we're Georgia, so it could happen, but I don't know.
Well, I mean, and he's still learning how to be a head coach. I mean, he has had to learn on the fly at Georgia the whole time. He didn't have the benefit of starting out at a smaller school, being anywhere else. I mean, yes, he was on the staff of, the greatest college football coach of all time. Like, I don't think anyone disagrees with that, right? And so he learned from the best, right? But he never got to go out on his own and learn the ropes and figure out, oh shoot, maybe I shouldn't promote from within, right? Maybe I do need to go outside and do that kind of stuff. And so what I will say, the fact that he course corrected right away after 1 year, I mean, that impressed me, right? Everyone wants to make the Mark Richt comparison, which I think is also dumb, but also won't go away until they win a national title. I mean, I will say, like, with Richt, I mean, he took too long to fix the William Martinez mistake, right? So he did it course correct. I mean, the fact that Kirby did that after one season, I mean, I don't know, that says a lot to me.
Yeah, no, and like you said, that he wasn't fired because of his first 5 years at Georgia, and I still say that there is no, outside of Clemson and Alabama, there's no other fan base that wouldn't switch with Georgia's, that wouldn't take Kirby in this program and plant him in their college town. It's just, I mean, maybe I guess at LSU maybe, but I mean, I'm telling you, built for the long haul, Georgia's going to be there, and I'm a homer, so I think they're going to get over the top. But I'm so good with any of this. Take the shots. I don't care. Whatever. I'm FTMF. I don't. That's all I got.
There was a graphic that was put out about the comparison between Nick Saban and Kirby Smart through 59 games.
Yeah.
And you look at it side by side, and it's literally Kirby has one more loss. Nick Saban has one national title. Everything else is pretty much the same.
But I mean, his first 2 years were at a small school, though. He
was at Michigan State, right?
No. He's at Toledo for 1 year. Toledo for 1 year.
1 year, yeah.
No, this was his Alabama coaching experience.
Oh,
gotcha. Yeah.
Okay, I saw that, and I my apologies. I thought that was the Toledo, Michigan State. Wow. Okay.
That was Saturday down south. Nick Saban was 48 and 11, and Kirby Smart's 47 and 12, and pretty much versus SEC versus top 25 versus top 10, SEC championship game, win-loss, SEC titles. The only difference is that Saban got one national championship.
Well, and the Saban train really got rolling. There was the first title, I think, in 09 against Texas, or maybe it was 08, whatever it was. But point being, like, that train really got rolling from a talent perspective because he was putting dudes in the draft year after year. And yeah, I mean, Georgia did not have 6 guys drafted in the first round. Truthfully, that 2017 Alabama recruiting class with 12 first-round draft picks or whatever it is, 9, 12, we'll never probably see that again. If we do, it'll be once maybe in our lifetimes. Like, that was a total anomaly, and they fell into that. Like, Saban's a great coach. He's the GOAT, don't get me wrong, but, like, I think even he would tell you, you just don't hit on that many recruits in a normal cycle. Like, even if they are 5 stars, like 5 stars pan out at a 2 out of 3 ratio anyways. So like, Alabama's good, like, they're great. And it's not really fair to compare Kirby Smart 5 years into the job to a guy that got, I think 5 years or 4 years at Michigan State, and then another 4 to 5 year career at LSU, and now has been entrenched for a little over a dozen years at Alabama. But the exciting thing is that, like, the trajectory of Georgia's program is on line with that. I really hope we get a win over Alabama, like, before Saban retires. But I also think, like, Saban probably rides off in the sunset within the next 5 years, at least, probably.
I've been saying that for the last 5 years.
Fair enough. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's just like, tell me any.
He just had his best class in the history of the rankings.
Sure, but like Georgia's 2018 class was one of the best in the history of the recruiting rankings at the time, and like, guys transferred, some guys didn't pan out. Like, in hindsight, that class has actually turned into kind of a weak one within the dynamics of the program. Bama's 2017 class, I think, was still a number 1 class, but like, it was not rated or seen as a super class at the time. So it's just like, I think recruiting is really good and there's an exact science there. But I mean, dude, they had 5 first-round wide receivers in 2 drafts.
Like, at Alabama.
Can I ask the question that maybe nobody's asked is how many of those guys did Kirby Smart recruit?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
He
was definitely
I'm just saying.
Yeah. He's definitely a part of that train for sure.
I did see something on Twitter, I want to say like yesterday or this morning that like I think there was 9 first rounders on offense that Kirby recruited to Alabama. I don't know if that's over his career there or what, but yeah, you're right. That's a really good point, John. Everyone says Kirby can't develop QBs. Well, look at Tua, baby. I'm totally kidding.
I mean, recruiting is a snowball. Recruiting is a snowball, and he's basically snowballed it every year. 1, 2, top 3, basically is his floor. I mean, if that's your floor on an ongoing like cyclical basis, and the next closest competitor to you is below you, like that gap isn't closing. I'm sorry. This is going to be more often than not.
No, you're right. And I mean that class last year, a lot of people that really know and understand recruiting, Georgia finished 3rd nationally, but they missed on a lot of guys that they wanted, especially early in the cycle, and really struggled with the pandemic and lack of visits and all of those scenarios. So it's like Georgia did. You're right. Like in a class of guys that really maybe weren't the first choice or it didn't go the way it was planned. You're right. They still finished with the number 3 class, which Dan Mullen would, kill to do. He never will probably. But if you look at this 2022 class, I mean, it's already 13 kids strong and far and away ranked the number 1 class in the country. And there's at least 3 5-stars in there. There might be 4 or 5 or 6 after senior years happen. So it's all in the right direction. The program is extremely healthy.
Yeah.
Sure. Yep.
Well, dude, this has been a lot of fun. I think we should probably do this more often. What are you guys doing in the preseason? I mean, in the off season, you guys going to put out some more content? Or, I mean, first off, we should plug the show. My God, a podcast. I imagine everyone's watching as a subscriber, but it's a good podcast. I've listened to literally every episode you guys have done. Enjoy it a lot. And I've always said the community of dog fans putting stuff out there has been a lot of fun to be a part of, and I enjoy it. So what are you guys going to be doing until we get some real football to talk about again?
Yeah, great question, John. What were we? No. So so for sure, like we're gonna pick up. So yeah, we were like super last minute actually, like season 1, kind of getting everything together. Like our first episode was like a season preview / Arkansas preview. So we'll get rolling earlier than that. We've got a couple things like tentatively lined up that we'll have out, just kind of some bonus content, I guess, over the summer. We've got some guests lined up, so I'll kind of tease that. But yeah, we'll get back into it. I would say more like as we roll into fall camp, we'll get more into like our usual weekly type schedule, and then back to our for those that haven't listened, we're generally during the season 2 episodes a week. A game review that we talk about usually like Mondays or whatever close after, and then we'll do a preview, a detailed kind of deep dive heading into the opponent every week.
Well, Graham is super busy at dogsports.com and on the Twitter defending all things Georgia against all things Florida. So be sure to be following Graham at Dog Out West. Go to dogsports.com. I mean, he churns out more than anybody out there. I'm constantly impressed about how much you can not only just stuff. It's not fluff. It's just hard, good stuff for April when It's awesome. Some of us are getting blocked by Anthony Dasher over Tom Quinn. Others are out there putting out content.
Somebody's got to set these lizards straight, and I'm here to do it.
All right, and we're actually gonna do some more play breakdowns from the G-Day and just sort of kind of continue our sort of preview. I mean, I think the more when we talk about this, and hopefully you guys are watching, you'll know these players by the time the season gets around and really what their tools are. Graham is a hella good watch to him crunch some numbers. So we're going to be doing some more of that. So stay tuned for that. And also, we owe some people some hats for some 5-star reviews. Didn't have my act together. The hats are on order. Haven't forgotten about you guys. So be sure to give My God a Podcast your 5 stars and our little show a 5-star review. And we appreciate everyone tuning in to both of us. This has been fun. So thank you guys a whole bunch. Graham, you got anything else you want to say?
My God a Podcast rules. #FTMF.
#FTMF.